Whether it's manipulating scales, making illegal moves, or using drugs, the UFC has a pretty rich history of cheaters. There are ruined careers and major scandals. Something for everyone. We have, for you, the biggest cheaters in the UFC. The first name on this list is none other than Alistair Overeem. The Dutch fighter used to be a genuine sensation after beating the legendary Brock Lesnar into retirement in his UFC debut. That spectacular win earned him a main card spot at the UFC 146 event. There, he was meant to face Junior Dos Santos in a match for the heavyweight championship title. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. That was until the Nevada State Athletic Commission announced that the rising star had failed a pre-match test. With an insane 14-to-1 testosterone-epitestosterone ratio, a clear sign of using testosterone-boosting drugs. This ended up causing Overeem to lose his spot and in getting a solid 9-month-long ban from any future events and matches. This also resulted in another scandal due to the fact that the Overeem-Dos Santos fight was meant to be the main event of the night. However, UFC owner Dana White was able to react quickly and replaced the disgraced fighter with Frank Mir. Despite the change, this event still remains one of the most significant cheating scandals in UFC history. Remember kids, winners never do drugs. I mean, at least in the sporting world. The next person on this list makes their entry here for one of the dumbest reasons you could ever think of. And that's none other than Nick Diaz. Honestly speaking, this dude deserves his own separate video. Not just because of how stupid he is, but also because of how many times he has demonstrated his mastery of the art. His record has everything you can imagine a fighter probably shouldn't do. Regularly missing media events, missing fights, scandals inside the cage, scandals outside the cage, and so many failed drug tests that you'd think he should start studying, for one. Diaz is undeniably one of the most controversial fighters in the UFC. It's a surprise that he still has a spot on the roster. However, his reputation wouldn't be much of a problem if he wasn't a repeated cheater either, tarnishing his reputation by using illegal substances on multiple occasions. You'd imagine that by the second or third time he got caught doping, he would have learned his lesson. Unfortunately, his IQ count isn't any higher than his win-to-loss ratio. But, as this next entry is going to show you, it doesn't just take using drugs to make someone a cheater. I'm of course referring to none other than Josimar Pajares. This guy, like Diaz, is also worthy of having his own separate video. But while the former is a plain no-brainer who enjoys stirring up drama, Pajares is just a straight-up cheater. He's broken many rules during his somewhat short career in the UFC. And although he's had his problems with substance-related cases, he's mostly known for breaking the rules of conduct. He resorts to underhanded moves when losing, such as the time he almost gouged Jake Shields' eyes out, and also refuses to listen to referees when they interrupt submissions and acknowledge tappings. Despite being fined, punished, and reprimanded, Pajares never once apologized for his actions, even though his conduct could have cost other fighters their careers or even their lives. For this reason, he was eventually cut loose for life back in 2015, along with a hefty fine and having his then-owned belt taken away. Justice well served, in my opinion. Let's see him try to cheat his way out of unemployment. Moving on, you'll soon see that even the biggest names in the UFC can resort to dirty tricks sometimes, with Anderson Silva as a prime example. The legendary Brazilian fighter has had his fair share of time in the UFC spotlight. However, a doping scandal would soon tarnish his career forever. Not just because of the illegal substances he'd been using, if that wasn't already bad enough, but also because of his outstanding levels of stupidity. Silva was once an undefeated champ in the promotion. That was until he began losing several fights in a row and got pushed into a pretty tight spot. No matter what he did, he couldn't regain his lost title, despite his reputation being relatively untarnished. And then came the stupidity. During a mandatory dope screening, the NSAC tested him positive for steroids. Instead of admitting to the offense, Silva thought the perfect thing to do was to come up with one of the fakest, low-effort stories you could ever think of. He told the NSAC committee that the reason for the steroids being in his system was due to him taking Viagra he'd bought in Thailand. Even Stevie Wonder could probably see the number of holes in that story. But hey, if I had $1 for every Silva who tried to lie his way through a failed drug test, I'd have $3, which isn't much, but it's weird that it happened thrice. I'm looking at you, the next two people on this list, the first of which is Thiago Silva. This guy's a repeat customer on the negative list, always being at the center of some scandal and regularly having problems with the law as well. I mean, he's been involved with some pretty serious illegal stuff. So you can't really blame the authorities, can you? But hey, who am I to judge? Due to all of his legal issues, Silva ended up losing not just his UFC contract, but also his reputation and a shot at the heavyweight title. His already declining career plummeted even further after failing a USADA test, which resulted in the cheater getting a $33,750 fine, along with a year-long ban. Interestingly enough, though, Silva wasn't punished for the use of an illegal substance, but rather for giving a false sample to prove his innocence. A sample that a quick test proved wasn't even human. Seriously, dude? So, who knows? Maybe he really wasn't on anything, you know? But what we do know is that he definitely deserves a spot on our list of cheaters. Moving on to the third Silva to tarnish his reputation due to a drug test, there's Wanderlei Silva. This one is notoriously known for his aggressive combat and unorthodox fighting style. He's also famous for his use of banned substances and among the few fighters who have actually made their careers due to being high, which in turn also increased his aggression. However, once the UFC decided to start controlling the use of illegal substances, the problems began to appear, which pretty much ended his career. During one matchup in particular, Silva openly denied a drug test. His career in the UFC was over, and the NSAC also fined him $70,000, a substantial amount, along with a lifetime ban. I don't even have a joke for this one. Kick him to the curb and don't even bother looking back. This brings us to the final entry on this list, Jon Jones. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, even Jon Jones, the legendary UFC champion, also graces our list with their presence. Despite being a strong presence and one of the promotion's legendary champions, his career was tarnished by two substance-related incidents that almost cost him his reputation, along with practically destroying his whole career. The first incident, when he tested positive for cocaine after the UFC 182 event, cost him his light heavyweight title. Soon afterwards, he got in an accident and had to leave the octagon for an entire year. Although he managed to win the interim title after his return, he lost that one too after yet another failed drug test. He was stripped of his belts, fined, and banned for another full year. Let's hope those 2 years away from the ring were enough to put him on the straight and narrow. Plus, you know how it goes. 3 strikes and you're out. Unless you're Nick Diaz, of course. Well, that's all the time we had for these cheaters today. We hope to see you in our next video.